My question would be Quinyon Mitchell is getting a lot of, I guess, talk, but there's a lot of, I guess, a little bit of mention about him being in more zone this week than not, and whether or not he was really locking down the other wide receivers.
Well, the Rams are not going to be concerned with who the corners are, and they never are because of the way they play offense. It's an offense that's built on a lot of things. Number one being motion. They're one of the most highest percentage deployers of motion in the NFL. They line up in a ton of reduced splits. They run their offense. They don't really care who the corners are. And just so people understand, Mitchell did not match up to Terry McLaurin, and there were only a few snaps in the game in which
Hmm.
McLaurin and Mitchell actually went head to head. So that whoever presented that narrative, that was not a real narrative in the game. But Mitchell's the right corner, Slay's the left corner. So and that's the way it is. They're not going to match up to any specific receivers, Dio, and the Rams are not going to be the least bit concerned about who's playing corner because they run their offense.
One thing on Quinion, Greg, your opinion pre-draft to now, anything is been what you thought? Is he better? What are your thoughts?
I really liked him coming out just because of the physical and athletic traits. The only question one had is he hardly ever played press man coverage at Toledo. So that's one thing you did not see on tape. So
Gotcha.
you can sit here and say that he's got the athletic and physical traits to do so, but now he's going up sort of a notch in quality to get to the NFL, and it's a little bit different. So that was the only questions. And in fact, the last thing I typed in my transition when I did him was I said overall Mitchell has all the needed traits to develop into a high level NFL outside corner, and I would expect he would come off the board in the first round.
Greg, on the game against Washington, um, what did you see from the O line in general?
Well, they played against a really good D line. Their offense was not particularly good through a good part of the game. Um, and you're going to have to understand that there's in every game there's going to be plays in which Jalen Hurts misses some basic concepts and then leaves the pocket. That's just the kind of quarterback he is. And then he can make some other plays. You know, I actually spoke with a coach this weekend, had a great conversation with a coach this weekend who had a bye and talking about a lot of quarterbacks in the league, including Jalen. And the thing that a lot of coaches ultimately love about Jalen Hurts when he's at his best, and this is a big deal, is he doesn't turn the ball over. I thought early in the fourth quarter, um, there were three consecutive Gainwell runs, and it wasn't Barkley. And I thought that one was a tackle trap, one was a wham trap, and those plays actually really, really stood out to me. Now, on Barkley's 39-yard touchdown, but Jurgens just
Hmm.
laid out box safety Butler on that 39-yard touchdown run. So,
Yeah.
that obviously I noticed watching the tape. It was hard not to notice.
When you have like a defensive coordinator like Fangio, what is kind of different from what he does compared to like people that come from his school or his quote unquote disciple?
When defenses play well, Eric, it's usually not just because they might have a good player here and there. All defenses in the league have some good players, but it's the details. It's the little things. It's when formations change, when there's motion, how do you react to that? When there's a different, when there's a formation that is how they get to it is a little different. It's all in the details. I mean, I'll give you a perfect example of the interception by Blankenship this past week was a really good example of that because one of the things they do, and this week they started out and played out of their quarters structure almost on every play. And they played a lot of quarters this week. But so they showed an initial quarter structure on that, and Noah Brown was the number two receiver, meaning, so the receivers are numbered from the outside in. So number one's the furthest outside, then number two. So Noah Brown was the number two receiver. And when they play quarters, a Fangio belief is that you want to disrupt the release of the number two receivers. That's a Fangio principle. So totally lost in that play was the fact that Carter DeJean was in press position, Cooper DeJean, excuse me, was in press position on Noah Brown, and forced him to reroute hard to the inside. Okay, now this was a flood concept, so Brown was trying to run an intermediate route to the sideline. But because he got pushed so hard to the inside, what that meant was Blankenship, who's responsible for 2 vertical and quarters, Blankenship could stay outside of Brown and therefore was in perfect position to make the interception. If Brown was not pressed and could run straight, what would have happened was Blankenship would have likely been in trail position, and the best he would have been able to do was maybe knock the ball down or tackle him after a completion. But because Cooper DeJean pressed number 2 and forced him inside, Blankenship was able to stay outside of him, and that resulted in the interception. It's the details like that that produce good plays on defense.
I think Carter's the best player on the defense. And I think he's kind of the barometer because when he's playing very well, it seems like the defense plays extremely well.
Right.
So I wanted to get your thoughts.
I thought he played a really good game. Yeah. And then, dominant's a relative term because obviously, even when you're dominant, you're not making a dominant play on every snap. That's just not humanly possible. But he was a force in that game. Like, he stood out on tape for sure. And we've talked about this. Jeff, Adam, and I have talked about this, when we do our pregame show, that you were waiting for him to, sort of be like that every single week because he's certainly more than capable of playing at that level every single week. I thought the fact that he played every snap was really, really impressive, and to play at a high level throughout the game.
What have you seen or out of Devontae Smith this year? Just from a production standpoint, it just seems like it's much lower.
I think there's a couple of factors here that have nothing to do with him. He's not a different player than he was last year. I think you have to remember the Eagles are throwing the ball significantly less than they have in the last couple of years.
Lowest of any
not
team,
as many
right?
targets to go around.
Yeah, lowest of any team.
And
26,
when you watch tape and you see opportunities, that he's run a really good route and is available for a throw, and Jalen, for whatever reason, doesn't throw it. He either came off it, left the pocket. So, there's a lot of factors involved. So I know he's probably killing fantasy people, but he's not a different player, and obviously A.J. Brown is clearly Jalen's number 1 guy in terms of who he wants to throw the ball to.
Seems like the Commanders were able to get their running backs really involved in the passing game. Do you think that's going to be an issue going forward?
The Commanders did a couple of cool things formationally. They actually put Bond in conflict a couple of times, and this stuff happens. I mean, our team's going to look at that and try to do some of the same principles, not the exact same play, because there's many ways to attack second-level defenders. Sure, they're going to do that because Bond and Dean have been very aggressive players. They've both have played with a quick trigger. When they see, they go. So there's ways to use that against them. So, yeah, will teams try to do that? For sure. But, yeah, they caught Bond a couple of times in this game. One where he just didn't play his assignment, and another where they just put him in conflict. I mean, second-level defenders almost always have a run and a pass responsibility. So it is possible to put them in conflict. And it doesn't mean they're bad players if they get put in conflict and they get caught. That happens. Look, there's offenses that are built on that. The 49ers offense for years with Kyle Shanahan has been built on putting second-level defenders in conflict, and they do a really good job. Anybody that has multiple responsibilities on defense, and there's a number of players that have that, can be caught.